Welcome to the Mavens and Misfits podcast series. This is the first in our series, and today's episode is called Hedge Your Bets. I'm HeatherP, and I'm here with my partner in this series, Chris Kostansky. Chris is a marketer with over a decade of executive search experience. He is the founder and CEO of Due North Executive Search and has provided talent for many of the marquee brands based in Minnesota and really nationally. But more importantly, Chris is also a good friend. Hi, Chris.
Hello, all. Glad to be here. And I'm here with you, Heather. You're a marketer by trade and spent the last decade plus working in both marketing and HR for a Fortune 6 company. Now you are the founder and CEO of HeatherP Solutions, where you help businesses close the gap between who they say they are, how they are experienced by their employees, and ensuring that their employees can deliver to their customers.
Yes, thanks, Chris. And so, Chris, as you and I have been prone to do over the past decade plus that we've known each other, you and I were chatting about our bird's eye view of what we see happening with talent right now in the world that we're living in. And more importantly, maybe what we anticipate will happen with talent. And one of the topics that's really hot within that right now that we're both seeing relates to engagement. Now, what I'm seeing is that businesses who had to transition to remote work have figured out the logistics, they've figured out the operations, everyone knows how to work their Zoom or their Microsoft Teams now, but they're struggling to translate their culture, which might have been built around an in-person experience. And so they're struggling to translate that into a remote work environment. And I don't know about you, but I have just seen a gazillion Zoom happy hours. And while they're fun, they sort of lose their effectiveness. And it's also a little like putting a Band-Aid on a much larger problem of effectively translating and transitioning culture to remote work. So while we have some savvy listeners who probably already know this, employee engagement is tied to higher customer satisfaction, higher profitability, and many, many, many more business performance metrics. So this matters. And when companies are not able to effectively adapt their employee engagement strategy, if quite frankly, they even have one, because I was shocked to learn that only 25% of companies have an employee engagement strategy. So when they're not able to adapt it to remote work, then what you get is burnout and what people are calling Zoom fatigue. And you know what happens when people start feeling burnt out? I think they call you, Chris, especially coming up on the first of the year, don't they?
You're absolutely right, Heather. When employees, particularly high-performing employees, feel less engaged and underappreciated, they start to look for the exits. And as we saw with the Great Recession, those high performers were eager to move on as the economy improved. Employers need to act now to actively engage their employees or risk an exodus of their best and brightest as the economy improves, which is looking like it's going to be starting in Q2 of next year as the vaccines become available. As a matter of fact, hot off the press, Morgan Stanley has said that they expect 5.9% growth next year in terms of GDP.
Wow.
And so it's going to be a pretty frothy time out there. And, you know, as we all know, the nature of this recession was very different. Much of it was driven by the need to restrict activity to fight the pandemic. So unlike other recessions, the recovery, once the pandemic is under control, looks like it's going to be really robust.
Yeah, which is both good news, but also challenging news when we think about this retention of talent. Because the other thing that drops engagement is when you're the person left behind after others have been let go. And unfortunately, we know a number of people that were let go from companies this year. So all of a sudden, you've kept your best talent, but they have more work and less resources, less people, less funding, less perks, bonuses, less raises, promotions, less investment in development. And I've had conversation with several people who are hanging out and hoping they get the package. And that is the definition of disengagement. And what's so sad about this is this is usually the top performers that a company wants to keep.
Once again, you're absolutely right, Heather. I'm hearing more and more from great candidates that are really quite literally just biding their time. Businesses have had reductions in force, pay cuts, or failed to provide any kind of remote work resources. All of these are really at risk of losing their best people in the coming months. Employees' memories are long in normal times when they feel like they have lost some benefit or compensation. One can expect that anything good or bad that an employer does during a pandemic will be magnified big time. As I've told many clients, the pandemic didn't suddenly create an increase in the supply of top performers. What it did create is a massive increase in the number of unqualified applicants, especially when you're looking at med tech or high tech industries. Those folks that may be coming out of the travel and leisure area are not necessarily going to be fits for those folks. So there's going to be a real mismatch in terms of what the market is providing in terms of supply and what is available.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I love too the point you made about this didn't drive an increase in the supply of top talent, especially when everyone talks about trying to get top talent. That was a conversation pre-COVID.
Yeah.
So let's transition to what this lack of engagement can mean for retention, because how companies are leading and managing their talent today is determining what their teams will look like in 6 months, 9 months, a year from now, or maybe to your point, as soon as Q2, Chris. And in fact, there may be leaders thinking I'm good because they're not hiring right now. And what they don't understand is that they may lose their best people when confidence in the economy returns. And then they're not going to be so good. Deloitte did an awesome study after the 2008 economic collapse and what happened with talent. And they saw that during the worst stages of the economy, people just buckled down and stayed put, or biding their time, like you said. But as soon as the confidence in the economy returned, boy, that voluntary turnover just like went through the roof. And for those of you who don't speak HR lingo, voluntary turnover is called quitting.
This is a really important point, Heather. As someone who was in the search business during the Great Recession, saw many companies lose sight of what was coming their way as the economy improved. When a company goes through a reduction in force, the workload for top performers goes up, usually without any additional compensation. And with so many working remotely right now, many leaders are pretty much blind to what employees are thinking as they work from home. You also mentioned the Deloitte study related to voluntary turnover after 2008. As I mentioned earlier, this is a really different recession that was brought on by the pandemic. Yeah. So just imagine the pent-up demand that will be unleashed as vaccines become available in 2021. Of course, there are sectors like travel and leisure that are going to take some time to recover, but there's going to be a lot of people that really want to travel someplace. And so I would expect it's going to be pretty frothy for them as well. But these employees generally cannot cross over into other high demand industries. Again, I mentioned high tech and med tech, that they're going to have a difficult time making a move over to those. So I really think this is a perfect storm wherein high performers who are feeling disengaged and underappreciated are going to be voluntarily turning over in unprecedented numbers.
So the engagement plan today is the retention plan of tomorrow.
Yep.
Now, Chris, as we were discussing this very topic about how engagement today drives your retention of tomorrow and your future, you brought up some really great insight and some interesting points about how the downsizing and freeze of hiring in the 2008 economic collapse had repercussions like 5 years down the road as it related to available manager talent and mid-level managers. I know I'm not speaking to this well, so could you tell us all about it?
Sure. One of the things that we noted in the years following 2008 is that there was a shortage of mid-level managers. Working together with one of the talent acquisition leaders at HP, I wrote a white paper several years ago. In it, we identified several contributing factors leading to this shortage: accelerated retirement of baby boomers, RIFs or reductions in force of lower level professional employees, and a failure to hire and by extension train the next generation of managers. This shortage was compounded as companies expanded into new sectors. So think of Google going into med tech.
Yeah.
I fully expect that we will see this exacerbated in the coming recovery. Unlike in 2008, the stock market is performing very well. So are 401ks. Boomers are now 56 years and up, and opportunity is expanding in technology companies broadly. So unfortunately, the war for this mid-level talent is going to be on again shortly. This time, I really think it will be worse for unprepared companies. The recovery from the Great Recession was steady but slow, so it really kind of disguised a lot of the talent shortage. But even there, I had large organizations, Fortune 500 organizations, that were unable to find really good talent at those mid-management levels.
Wow. Yeah. And so I don't want to leave our listeners hanging. So let's help them out, Chris. Let's tell them what they can do about it. So one of my first suggestions to any leaders is first and foremost, put your own oxygen mask on first. Meaning, we're all dealing with what I call the lasagna layers of stress. I mean, you're talking about COVID is a layer, economy is a layer, remote work's a layer, distance learning, it goes on and on. It's like the most massive lasagna of stress we've ever had. So to show up as a great people leader, which is critical for engagement, you need to first and foremost manage those lasagna layers of stress for yourself. That's first and foremost. The next suggestion is about having a live action engagement strategy. And what do I mean by live action? Meaning, well, I guess, first of all, Chris, to our point earlier, first you need to make sure you have an engagement strategy. And then make it live action. So it is showing up in consistent words, content, actions, and activities on a daily basis in your business across each and every people leader. And the reality is few companies are doing this. If you're one of those that does not have a live action engagement strategy, FYI, this is a service that HeatherP Solutions offers. And in fact, it's one of our specialties. And we develop employee engagement strategy that's specific to a client's brand, culture, and vision. So that's the other thing you want to check for is your strategy really specific to your business's brand, culture, and vision. And then you got to break that down for managers. They want to show up as great people leaders. So break it down into tangible, weekly content, activities, and actions that those managers can take so they're set up to be great people leaders. And, if you don't have that and you're interested in learning more, you can check out our website. But in summary, my suggestions are first, put on your own oxygen mask, manage your lasagna of stress. Secondly, make sure you have an engagement strategy. And if you do have an engagement strategy, you've got to make sure it's live action. So Chris, what solutions or suggestions would you recommend?
So one of the things that I suggest that leaders do is look at what has happened over the last 8 months and honestly assess what they may have done well in the eyes of their employees. And more importantly, what didn't go well. Now, granted, business realities such as layoffs, furloughs, wage cuts, etc., they all needed to happen to a greater or lesser degree for many companies. But how the organization handled any of these is really important.
Hey, Chris, can I add one point to that you
Sure.
just pointed out? Because I think it could be easy for managers to go, well, yeah, but we had to lay off people. And totally, get it. But you were just calling out how it was handled makes a big difference. And I think about Airbnb, who had to lay off 25% of their workforce. But the way they did it was with such compassion that you actually had people posting on social media who had just been let go, saying it was the best layoff they'd ever experienced. And it was how they handled it versus other firms that had to lay off maybe 10% of their workforce, but they didn't handle it with the level of compassion, either for those being let go or for those left behind. So I think your point is really good. There are those business realities, but how did the organization handle it?
Oh, absolutely, Heather. One of the things that we know from the search side of the world is that, again, memories are long. People are going to remember what happened during this time, that they had a lot of time to sit at home and think about what's happening to them at work.
Yep.
So, to that end, managers would do well to confidentially survey their teams and see where they are at before the end of the year. And what's the reason to do this before the end of the year? As you alluded to, Heather, let's just say the busiest day of the year with respect to high performers contacting me is usually January 2nd.
Wow.
So the survey doesn't need to be fancy. As a matter of fact, it's better if it comes across as just a simple touch base call where the manager can directly empathize with the employee. I know it seems like just more work layered into an already tough year, but think of it this way. It's an investment in keeping those prized employees when the economy turns around. And I would also add there that if indeed your organization is considering adding people in the coming year, that you get on that sooner rather than later, because there's going to be increased competition for those really talented people. And shameless self-promotion, if indeed you're looking for great marketing and product management talent, you can certainly check out our website.
Definitely check out Due North website for sure. I think that's a really good point that you were just adding of, if you're looking to add people, like if they're already looking at their Q2 and they're thinking we're going to add people, if I'm correct, employee referrals is still one of the top sources for most companies. And so there's been those employees, they've been talking to their friends and family and people in their networks while they've been working from home. They've been sharing how their companies have been showing up for them, where they felt supported, and also where they're not. And that word of mouth, it has a huge impact on talent. And I would guess, Chris, that when you get that phone call January 2nd from people, when you try to reach out to someone else on January 3rd about joining a company, you run into a lot of that word of mouth in trying to secure candidates too.
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, it's remarkable the number of companies that have done extraordinarily well during this COVID pandemic, but haven't done well by their employees, which is to say, they didn't give them great remote work assistance. They may have not given them the proper tools or supported the use of of their broadband internet access. So people remember these things, and the memories are long out there as far as how people get treated.
That's so good. So in summary, employee engagement is a business issue. And if you don't feel that business issue right now, I hope our listeners understand that Chris and I are trying to tell you, you will feel it. It's an issue of productivity, profitability, and quality. So what companies do now, what you do right now, and I know, we're looking, it's December, but what you do now for engagement, that is your retention play for Q2, for 6 months, 12 months, and 18 months from now. And the suggestions we have to address this include, first and foremost, put your own oxygen mask on first so you can show up as a great people leader. Manage that lasagna layers of stress. Make sure you have an employee engagement strategy. And then if you don't already have one, or even if you do, make sure that employee engagement strategy is a live action one, where it's giving managers the content, the activities, and the actions they need to be great people leaders. And if you don't have that, you can certainly contact us. And then, Chris, you had some awesome suggestions.
Yeah. So as mentioned, find some way to check in with your team members individually. Make make certain that this is in no way related to the annual review process,
Ooh,
which
good.
also seems to come down at this point in time. Um, it, you don't want to confuse these two things.
Yeah.
Empathize with them about the challenges of this year. And Heather's fond of saying something called lead with your humanity.
Mm.
Everybody's kind of felt this year, and it's been rough. And I think that asking them what you and your company can do better can go a long way to making them see you too as a human, and maybe have a little bit of empathy towards the tough work that you had to do.
Mm.
If there are areas where you as a leader know your company had to make tough decisions, whether that was a reduction in force or wage cuts, be proactive in discussing these. It shows your team that you understand their difficulties. And if there is anything that you can share about the restoration of those lost benefits, do it. Whatever you do as a leader, don't just let employees go into their holiday breaks without trying to re-engage them. Some organizations are giving extended holiday breaks this year in lieu of compensation that has been lost. To me, that just means a whole lot of extra time to work on a resume.
Ooh, that's a good point. And Chris, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I was just thinking about if companies know that they're going to be hiring, let's say early in 2021, couldn't they go to your website? Couldn't they give you a call and ask you for the pulse check on what great talent is saying about them and how hard that might be?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can always feel free to schedule a no obligation call with me. We offer advice to clients large and small, but one of the things that we do know is that still for many of these folks that are most in demand, the unemployment rate might even still be close to zero because they're in high demand. The recession did not change that. And so it is, if they're in high demand now, they're going to be in higher demand Q1, and they're going to be in way higher demand in Q2 and moving forward. So moving forward earlier is probably going to save you some money in terms of what you need to pay to either A, acquire those people, or B, hire those people.
Yeah, really good point. So I hope our listeners are leaving here today with a sense of urgency, and also with some avenues of action that they can take to really drive their business strategy in 2021 with their talent. So thanks for joining us for this first of our Mavens and Misfits podcast series with today's episode called Hedge Your Bets.
Join us next time in early 2021. We have all sorts of great topics planned, from how people leave managers to repairing a damaged employer brand, and of course, how the haystack just got bigger. There's no more needles in it. It just got bigger.
This is HeatherP.
And Chris Kostansky signing off.
Thanks for listening.